Hey, this is Pastor Nick Gillespie from the Grace Baptist Church. Thank you for tuning in to our Bible study series on the Gospels. I hope you enjoy it. I hope it's an encouragement. I'll see you at the end of the video. All right, we already prayed, so let's go ahead and turn our Bibles to Daniel chapter 2 as we start our new lesson series on the Gospels. I want to remind you of a couple things as we start. Ask any question you want during the service. Something feels like it's being taught, too high, too low, whatever the case is, too quick, you don't understand it. Feel free to ask. Stop and ask. Of course, Sunday mornings, that's not what we do. But Wednesday evenings, yes, of course. Let's keep it with questions. Let's not turn Wednesday night. Obviously, we don't want to, keep a debate or carry on things for a long time. Be cognizant of each other's time. If we could, a few things we're going to cover going forward, the intertestamental period, where it fits. Of course, we're going to cover that somewhat today. Daniel's image, Herod, just all these different things we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about genealogy, chronology. On my desk, I have something. I have, Baker's Bible Atlas. We're going to cover some of the geography of Jesus' time. We're going to cover the genealogy, political aspects. We're also looking into Ussher's Annals of the World. It's interesting the things that he found in history that go into each day. Just amazing work. We're going to cover that. Some of the fulfillments of Old Testament prophecy will be brought up through the whole study, and of course the life of Christ is the most important part. And then at the end of each lesson, we'll try to have probably 3 points. I want to have you be able to take a lesson home at the end. Today we were going to have a little bit of discussion beforehand before we click record. So we're going to go ahead and just get into the lesson real quick, and we'll be quick this evening. I have here Gentiles and prophecy. As you see there, the column with the red is the one that matters to us now. I don't want to get into the different aspects of what the metals mean on the image, the lion, the bear, the leopard, the beast with iron teeth. That's from Daniel chapter 7. We're not going to cover any of that. We might talk about the main person for a moment, but the end time reference we're not going to cover at all, and we'll cover the prophecy gap a little bit. But what I want you to be cognizant of when we talk about Gentiles in history, when we talk about Daniel's dream, Nebuchadnezzar's dream, and Daniel, almost said Belteshazzar, Daniel's interpretation of the dream, we're talking about an image, and we're talking about Gentile kingdoms and how they have interacted with the Jews. Of course, with the Gentiles, China isn't going to be mentioned in any of this. Why? The Jews knew about China, but China's on the other side of the continent. Other countries aren't going to be mentioned in this. Russia. We have Gog and Magog and all these different things going on, but we're talking about the ones that had the main influence on the Israelites from the point of the Babylonian captivity at the end of the split kingdom. Actually, that isn't the end of the split kingdom. It was at the end of the sovereign reign of the kings of Judah. And so we'll cover those real quick. So let's go to Daniel chapter 2, and we'll pick it up here in verse 1, if you would, please. Daniel chapter 1, verse 1. And in the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar dreamed dreams, wherewith his spirit was troubled, and his sleep brake from him. Now remember, Daniel is not written in chronological order. And so it's interesting here, you get in the second year of his reign, but Daniel's already been there for a while. How do you reconcile that? That's study for another time again. Verse 2, then the king commanded to call the magicians and the astrologers and the sorcerers and the Chaldeans for to show the king his dream. So they came and stood before the king. And the king said unto them, I have dreamed a dream, and my spirit was troubled to know the dream. Then spake the Chaldeans to the king in Syriac, O king, live forever. Tell thy servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, the thing is gone from me. If you will not make known unto me the dream and the interpretation thereof, ye shall be cut in pieces, and your houses shall be made a dunghill. So not only are you going to tell me what the interpretation of the dream is, you're going to tell me the dream. You ever wake up with one of those? You wake up and you have some crazy dream and and it troubles you, but you don't remember it. Here, he doesn't remember it, but he expects somebody else to tell him what it is. You ever have one of those? You wake up, Pastor Matt and I, we've had a discussion about this because I had a dream one time within the last year. It's like, is God telling me something here? Of course, I didn't talk about the specifics of what was in the dream, but we had a discussion. But it was funny, after we had the discussion, it was like the next night or 2 nights after that, had another dream. And, you just have a dream, that's not of the Lord. And, some weird thing, some other thing. And you realize, God's probably not speaking to me in dreams. And it probably wasn't the case on the first thing. And so come to find out, it probably wasn't, it definitely wasn't on the second. And it's just interesting on the timing. But if you ever try to tell somebody, about a dream and, you were in it, you were there and it was all freaky to you, but they don't, hey, here we were. We were in this convenience store. I was so freaked out and I couldn't run away. You were there. We're on a floor of marshmallows. And, you're all freaked out, but then the guy's looking at you like, what are you on drugs or something? And so Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. Can't remember it. Just pick it up here. No, by the way, you shall be cut in pieces and your house be made a dunghill. God changes Nebuchadnezzar's heart drastically. But again, that's a study for another time. Let's skip down to verse 19. Then was the secret revealed unto Daniel in the night vision. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Verse 26. The king answered and said to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, Art thou able to make known unto me the dream which I have seen and the interpretation thereof? And Daniel, of course, gives credit to the Lord. Daniel answered the presence of the king and said, the secret which the king has commanded cannot the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, the soothsayers show unto the king. But there is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets. See, there is a God in heaven. So, even Daniel here doesn't take credit for it. And maketh known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days. Which, by the way, in the latter days, we're talking about the last, when you look at this thing here and you start looking at the feet of iron clay and the stone down there at the bottom after the prophetic gap, we're talking about the end of the tribulation here. We're talking about the revived Roman Empire and the latter days. This image is all one system. All right, sorry. Lose my place again. Thy dream and the visions of thy head upon the bed are these. Now look down at verse 31. Thou, O king, sawest, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. This image's head was of fine gold, his breast and his arms of silver, and his belly and his thighs of brass. You see that outlined up here on this, and we're not claiming that this image is at all what it looked like, but we're just going to put one up. His legs of iron, his feet part of iron, part of clay. Thou sawest till the stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet that were of iron and clay, and brake them into pieces. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, the gold broken into pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing folds, and the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them, and the stone that smote the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. This is the dream, and I will tell the interpretation thereof before the king. So what you see here is you see what might look like an image of a person. You see the different things it's made out of. Now what we're talking about is one world system. This image, as we're going to cover when we get to Matthew, is representing, I believe, the kingdom of heaven. Kingdom of heaven is within the atmosphere. The only people to have complete dominion over the kingdom of heaven was Adam and Eve. And Satan has tried since that day until now to have everybody under one control. Got pretty close at the Tower of Babel. And then other people tried in the meantime, trying to take over the world. And some of these are mentioned. Nebuchadnezzar tried it. Alexander the Great tried it. Various Caesars tried it. And tried to be controlled under the kingdom of heaven. So this image here, the government systems of this world will be destroyed by Christ. That stone that's cut out without hands is talking about Jesus. So let's pick up here in verse 38. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field, the fowls of heaven, hath he given into thine hand, and hath made thee ruler over them all. Thou art this head of gold. Now, so that's right there, the Babylonian Empire. Let's get my glasses back on since I'm blind. And so again, these dates that are on this list, they're not exact. They're not, we could go in and debate, but we're not here for that purpose. We're just in here for the general. If these dates are slightly off, I'm not really that concerned with it. So the Babylonian Empire, of course, started by, earlier than Nebuchadnezzar, but Nebuchadnezzar is the main player. And you see the dates there. So before this, remember the Assyrians carried off the northern kingdom. And when they carried off the northern kingdoms were just assimilated out throughout all the rest of the countries. However, it was different with the Babylonian captivity. In the Babylonian captivity, they were carried away and they were taken care of. Remember, that was only for 70 years, and then they came back. Not everybody came back. So the ones who were carried off by Assyrians and then the Babylonians, they both had one practice in common. And what they would do is they'd leave the poor. They leave the poor Jews, they leave the uneducated, they leave those people and then invite other people to come in and annex the area. So those other people would come in, become squatters, look for free land, interbreed with the poor and uneducated Jews that were left. These are the people that became the Samaritans. And so when you talk about the New Testament, this all came from the Babylonian captivity. As the Jews were carried away, before they were brought back, things were given to the Samaritans. So the Samaritans were hated by the Jews. And then, we can talk about Sanballat, Tobiah, and all those sorts of stuff, but we won't on that. So that's the Babylonian Empire. And so, verse 39. And after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee. This is the Medes and Persians. And again, you see the dates there. And roughly, about 200 or so years. Queen Esther, Esther reigned during this time. The wise men would have been under this system. And, the Medes and Persians. And so the Jews were carried away. Now, when I talk about Jews, we're talking about those of Judah, the tribes of Judah and Benjamin were carried away during the Babylonian Empire. Daniel rose to be one of the main men, number 2. There, and then they were returned under the Medes and Persians. So under Darius, Cyrus. Remember, Cyrus was called out in Isaiah a couple hundred years before he was even born. So let's keep on going here. Another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. That's talking about then the Greeks. Daniel chapter 11 talks about that in a lot of detail. Alexander the Great. Hellenism would be where this fits in. But so remember the Greeks, matter of fact, the Romans and the Greeks both had this in common, that as they went to take over an area and as they went past it, they were glad to let that local government stay in place as long as they're loyal to the Greeks and the Romans. Alexander the Great had no interest in going somewhere, changing their government system, changing their religious system. He was willing to adopt. As a matter of fact, the Jews, according to history, came out of the gates of Jerusalem and showed Daniel, Alexander, where he was in the Bible. And so Hellenism was a big thing to the Jews, and Hellenism, of course, the Greek-izing Hellenism. But so that's there, and so why you'd find a lot of Greek names and language being accepted and all that. Verse 40. And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron. This is talking about the Romans, and iron being one of their symbols. For as much as iron breaketh in pieces, and subdueth all things, and as iron that breaketh all these shall it break in pieces and bruise. And so what happens here, the Greek Empire is Alexander the Great. Alexander, the Great, dies in Babylon, and he doesn't name a successor. So his 4 kings step up, and Ptolemy ended up being the king over the area of Israel, of the Jews. And so then it was divided between the 4. There ended up being a lot of fighting there, and then the fall of the kingdom. But from that then gave a vacuum and the rise to the Romans to then, just kind of march through fairly easily there, a few years later. But definitely the Romans went through and really advanced civilization that way quite easily. So then Jesus would have been born during on this image, the Roman Empire. Notice that, the legs of iron were got 2, because remember the Roman Empire split into 2. You had the Roman, you had the Byzantine. Of course, that happens a little bit later. Then the prophetic gap, that's the church age, which the Old Testament teaches nothing about. Remember, Paul calls the church age a mystery, and because the Old Testament prophets didn't talk about it at all, they didn't know about it. And so then you get to the bottom part here, you get to the feet and iron and clay and stone. We're talking then about the tribulation. And we're talking about the revived Roman Empire and whatever that looks like. Verse 41. And whereas thou sawest the feet and the toes, part of pottery's clay and part of iron, and the kingdom shall be divided, and there shall be in it the strength of the iron, for as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with the miry clay. So again, this isn't as strong as the Roman Empire, but at the same time, it's still a two-part. Remember those 10 kings? These 10 toes are something. And that's a completely different study. If you want, you can flip over to Revelation 13 and all that and see that some other time. Verse 43. And whereas thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men. Oh, there's a cross reference to Genesis chapter 6 there. But they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. And in the days of those kings shall the king of heaven set up a kingdom. Again, we're getting towards the end of the tribulation. We're getting towards the beginning of the millennium, which shall never be destroyed. And the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Jesus Christ will stand as ruling and reigning with an iron fist. We will rule and reign with him. And the millennium will then be, the kingdom of heaven will then be under one man's dominion, the King Jesus Christ. Verse 45, for as much as thou sawest the stone that was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that had broken in pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, and gold, the great God hath made known to the king, which shall come to pass hereafter, and the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure. So all of these are Gentile kingdoms. And if you lay the image on the side, it's talking about those different kingdoms, talking about the Babylonians, talking about the Medes and Persians, talking about the Greeks, talking about the Romans. And so remember the Roman Empire, I believe when it's talking about the split during the tribulation, I think it's then talking about secular, it's talking about religious. But, however, that's a little bit of speculation. So right now, we're in the middle of the time that Jesus was born. We're in the middle of the Roman Empire. But remember, we're at the very beginning of the Roman Empire, but we're in the middle of the whole Roman experience. Remember, up to this point, up until Julius Caesar, it was the Roman Republic. And let's go ahead and cover those real quick. So Jesus is born under Roman rule. Here we have Julius Caesar. Interesting thing, Caesar was his surname. However, Caesar later on became the name of the title of an emperor because they were identifying with this guy. And so we're talking about his life. He was born July 100 BC, died March 44 BC. Of course, you know the date. That was on the 15th. The Ides of March, which isn't about the death of Julius Caesar, just happened to be the day he died. But it's Ides to be in the middle. But he's the one that took it from being a Roman Republic now into a dictatorship. And so notice he died in March 44 BC. From that point, Brutus, Augustus, and one other guy, then there was 3 people in charge. And then Caesar Augustus, then January 27 BC, ended up then becoming the next emperor. And so he was the emperor for quite a while, as you see there. So Jesus was born under Caesar Augustus. I say that. No, that is not in the statute Jesus there being born, baby Jesus under, I'm not sure if that's maybe an angel. So, this would be Caesar Augustus, and then this man would fulfill Scripture from 1,500 miles away unwittingly when he starts the taxation, but we'll get to that in a moment. So, under the Roman rule, so now we're under the Roman Empire, where Caesar Augustus, and remember, he wasn't born with the surname Caesar. It ended up being a title for him. So underneath Caesar Augustus, remember I said earlier that they're glad to let the local people rule themselves. Here we have Herod the Great. Herod the Great was a client king, and he was a tyrant, small tyrant, but he was a tyrant nonetheless. He would, they were taxing the people pretty hard, and then he would pass that on to other people, who would then pass it on to Caesar. So Herod the Great was a tyrant. He was a big builder, though. He was the one that built Herod's temple, the second temple. The temple that Jesus walked in was the temple that Herod built. He was a client king of the kingdom of Judah. This is also the king that when the wise men showed up from the Persian Empire, of course, we know that they're under different people, but they're still Persians. And so they came and figured out the time when the stars showed up. And so this is the king that then ordered the death of all the children in Judah, or that area of Ramah, for 2 years and younger. And so this was a bloody guy. He died shortly thereafter. So this is the guy that died. So Joseph took Mary and Jesus into Egypt. This is the one that died that he was then able to come back. So this is one they paid tribute. After Herod's death, the kingdom was split into 3. And so when you hear the name Herod after Herod the Great, that's Herod Antipas. And he had a brother named Philip the Tetrarch. So when John the Baptist got beheaded for calling out Herod for taking his brother Philip's wife, that's talking about the 2 sons of Herod. Herod Antipas, and maybe Antipas, I don't know how you pronounce it, and Philip the Tetrarch. And so, the Herod Antipas's wife's daughter then called for the head of John the Baptist and had him killed. So after Herod's death, this area was split into 3 in his will, and it was agreed to by Augustus, and which basically he was glad to follow the will of Herod the Great for whatever he wanted. Matter of fact, Herod the Great died a pretty awful, gruesome death. Tried to kill himself with a knife. He was in so much pain, and stopped by those around him. So Pilate came later as a governor, but Herod was still king. So under these people, so it'd be the publicans taking taxes, and so the taxes were collected from the native people, the Jews. Imagine a country taking over the United States, and then people from among us were taken. Zacchaeus was one of these people, and so hey, you need to tax these people $20. You think take over that and keep? So he'd go, he'd tax them for 30, hand off 20, keep 10, and it made him rich. And that's when he ended up, giving all that back. But Matthew was a tax collector as well. So the Romans were big on keeping track of people and taxation. They had an empire to build. So with that, let's go to Luke chapter 2. Luke chapter 2, turn over there real quick. So Luke chapter 2 and verse 1. Let's pick it up here. And it came to pass in those days that there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus. So remember, that's the guy we just talked about. That all the world should be taxed. And this taxing was first made when Cyrenius was governor of Syria. So hey, he thought it was a good idea. Let's do it again. And all went to be taxed, everyone into his own city. And Joseph also went up from Galilee out of the city of Nazareth unto Judea, unto the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David. See, that's an interesting thing here. Everybody knew that if Israel was a sovereign nation at the time of Jesus' birth, Joseph would have been the king of Judah. And everybody knew this. When Jesus walked about and he was healing, and they said, "Hey, thou son of David," they knew who he was. They knew that he was a fulfillment of Scripture, but they just ignored it. Even here, they knew. All right, so where are we at? Verse 5, to be taxed with Mary, his espoused wife, being great with child. So there you have them going back to Bethlehem, to their place to be taxed and for Jesus to be born. So this guy here fulfilled Scripture unwittingly, because if he didn't make that taxation part of the thing, then Jesus very well could have been born in Nazareth and messed everything up. And I doubt that would have really happened. But so Jesus was born in the reign of the Roman Empire. Rome was fairly hands-off when it came to local foreign governments, as long as it was in their interest. They would leave soldiers where needed, and if there was an uprising, they'd have the soldiers there to squash it. And which we saw, and part of the reason which we'll get to that towards the end of the Gospels, Pilate giving in. Pilate had a bad track record with rebellion, and that was part of the reason he caved. He didn't want to have Jesus crucified. And we'll get to him later. But so with those hands off, then we have to ask ourselves, then who ran the show on these places, right? And so with that, the Jews were allowed to govern themselves through the Sanhedrin. You've probably heard that before. You may have heard the term High Council. It was an assembly of rabbis, of priests. It was led by the high priest. There would be the scribes, there would be the Pharisees. All these would be different people. So that High Council, the High Sanhedrin, was in Jerusalem, but every town had their own Sanhedrin that they'd have to answer to. And these people were the ones constantly giving Jesus and his disciples a hard time. Yes, he's born under Roman rule, but it was local tyrants that were the real problem, and which is still the case today. Our federal government isn't a huge issue as much as our cities and our counties. They're more oppressive than our federal government is to us. So that was the political area that Jesus was born into, and so we want to cover that in our first week. Now let's take 3 takeaways from there real quick, and then we'll go ahead and get going. Watch this. Number 1, we can thrive in any government system. People talk about being scared. I'm never going to vote for anything socialism. Not going to vote that way. Communism, that's just craziness. But we can thrive in any government system. Paul was under huge oppression by the local governments. Thrived. The church, early church, started from 12 men who turned the world upside down. Just amazing stories. Number 2, God will work through tyrants even if it gets worse. It could get worse for us. Nobody's out here killing our children yet and all that sorts of stuff, but it could get worse before it gets better. Now, what we found in all times is it's cyclical, because number 3, tyranny never lasts. The tyranny of the Roman Empire eventually fell. Now it's going to pick up again, but then it's going to fall again. And of course, there's going to be people that are going to be claiming during the millennium that Jesus is a tyrant. Matter of fact, I think that's what a lot of our movies are geared towards right now, is sort of space tyrant that we have to protect ourselves from. The tribulation is going to be a crazy time. And people are going to be convinced that they need to protect themselves from Jesus, and there's going to be local heroes to do that. But anyways, tyranny never lasts, and we'll rise above it. And but even if there is tyranny, we still have a job to do. Our King is still Jesus Christ, and we have to fulfill His mission. All right, hope that was helpful to you. And I know it was short tonight. We'll build on that. And so be back next week. Love you all very much. Let's go ahead and pray and be dismissed. Congratulations. You've endured to the end. You made it to the end of the sermon, and I'm proud of you. Hey, my number's at the bottom of the screen here. Text me if you need anything. I hope to see you here sometime. Have a great day.